Mental health is one of the national health priority areas, and hence it's made its way as one of the key focus areas of the National Curriculum for Health and Physical Education. The Australian Government works alongside state governments to produce national mental health strategies and to establish national health commissions across certain states, which encourage collaborative practices. And that's because mental health affects all people in all countries and of all ages, with 25% of people likely to suffer from mental health illness at some stage in their life, according to the World Health Organization 2001. However, within Australia, it's actually as high as 45%, according to 2007 data from the National Survey of Mental Health, conducted by the ABS. Sourced from AIHW's paper Australia's Children, Their Health and Wellbeing 2002, the child and adolescent component of the National Survey of Health and Mental Wellbeing found that 15% of boys and just over 14% of girls between the age of 4 and 12 had some sort of mental health problem. So it's therefore important that as teachers we educate our students on mental health, and particularly the coping strategies and resilience that is required in order to survive in today's world. More recently, in 2007, the National Survey of Mental Health and Wellbeing found that 9% of young Australians reported high levels of psychological distress, and 1 in 4 experienced at least one mental disorder. Of this, females were 2 times more likely to report distress than their male counterparts, and 20% of young Australian females reported anxiety. Between 2008 and 2009, 7% of hospitalisations of young Australians were mental health based, and this percentage was actually 3 times higher in Aboriginal communities, with a higher suicide rate as well, according to the ABS. So these are all substantial findings that really need to be addressed, particularly seeing as psychological distress and mental health can cause stigmas and also be a precursor for self-harm or suicide later on in life. So what causes all of these statistics? There are a number of key determinants that influence mental health, and these have been taken from the National Survey of Mental Health and Wellbeing conducted by the ABS and also from the World Health Organization reports. So firstly, we have social inequalities that include the family context and social setting of the family. So having one parent around or parents that are substance abusers. And in relation to this, also if adolescents had 1 or more parents unemployed, that also affected the offspring's chance of suffering from mental health problems as well. So the socio-economic situation, and that includes the housing conditions and neighbourhood violence as well, are all considered to be substantial risk factors for mental health. The second area that also appear to be a risk factor is significant life events. So these are things like living in poverty, suffering from neglect or abuse, or having an impairment, and the individual traits that arise from that, so things like low self-esteem and poor social skills. Now, I think the most significant determinant that we as teachers should be aware of is the school context. So things like bullying, peer rejection, poor behaviour management and failure to achieve are all considered determinants of mental health. And this is an area in which we really have the ability to protect our students against mental health problems and help reduce the influence of risk factors. More recently, however, other determinants of mental health have been added to the list by the AIHW, and these include the use and content of media, as well as environmental issues like climate change, which they state can cause a sense of despair in young Australians. Adding to this, Wynne also states that although there has been an increase in the level of education, the state of young Australians' mental health is worsening due to social changes, and things like the unrealistic standards of image and lifestyle that the media enforces on us are likely to have increased the prevalence of anxiety. So with such a range of determinants, it's important that we educate our students to be lifelong learners in order to live well in today's changing society. And because of the high prevalence of mental disorders, mental health and wellbeing is well embedded within the new national curriculum, and it lies within the personal, social and community health area. And due to time constraints, I'm just going to highlight a few areas where mental health can be focused on, and I'll be looking specifically at stage 4 and 5 examples, being a secondary teacher myself. And mental health also encompasses a large number of different mental diseases. So when looking at examples, I'll be just focusing more on mood disorders and coping strategies and resilience. So mental health fits within content descriptor 1, which asks students to investigate the impact of life transitions and analyse factors that shape their well-being. So in terms of mental health and well-being, this could mean being aware of the changes that they may go through and helping to reduce anxiety about life transitions. It can also be embedded within content descriptor 3, where students are to investigate and examine practical strategies to manage change. So building on content descriptor 1, it's not just an awareness of what is to come, but some strategies to cope with the changes and help to minimise the risk of suffering from emotional and mental distress. It's also addressed within content descriptor 4, where students are to analyse and reflect on emotional responses to situations. So here you could discuss students' role in having more of an awareness of their own feelings and others, and essentially being able to understand when they may need to seek help for themselves or others. Then within content descriptors 7 and 8, which addresses help seeking in a range of situations and critiquing and evaluating health information. Now these can relate to any focus area, but it would be important to identify useful websites for mental health and develop health literacy of mental health here. Then finally within content descriptor 12, where students are required to develop an understanding of the importance of building communities. So here you could highlight the benefit of having a support network, particularly within Aboriginal communities, as some of the literature will highlight later on. Looking very briefly at cross-curricular links with mental health and well-being, it would also be well suited to approach the subject of sustainability in terms of personal sustainability. And also it could be a good area to bring up Aboriginal perspectives, particularly since there are such disparities between Aboriginal Australians and white Australians when it comes to mental health statistics. So one of the main findings throughout the literature is the need to develop whole school interdisciplinary approaches to teaching mental health. And as Meldrum and Peters state, the school's not the only place where young people's lives revolve. So in order to address this, Preva 2006 suggests that we should take a multi-agency approach to teaching mental health. And these findings are also supported by the idea that the HPS framework is the best resource to guide health education practice. In conjunction with this, community involvement is also highly effective in teaching of mental health issues to Aboriginal students. And Osborne in 2012 highlights the need to translate Western knowledge systems and build them into the knowledge base of existing Aboriginal community context to make learning relevant. So again, this is important when we're teaching mental health. We've already seen from the statistics that Aboriginal people are more likely to suffer from mental health issues compared to non-Aboriginal Australians. There's also literature to suggest that scare tactics don't necessarily work in terms of relaying information about mental health. And instead there's more focus in the literature on developing lifelong learners that have the capabilities to manage the uncertain situations that life throws at them. And in order to establish this, there's a need to encourage communities of learners, as Wim puts it, which involves students, teachers, local community services, family members, etc. Related to this, Catton and Tilford in 2006 highlight that students prefer to be informed rather than told information. And from their studies, they found that active involvement through student-centred activities were a preferred method of teaching style of mental health by students. So in this way, teachers are able to actually build a better learning relationship with their students and perhaps role model some of the issues around positive relationships covered within mental health. This is consistent with findings from Glover and Butler in 2004, that the school ethos and the organisation of the school is important in developing young people's health and well-being. Adding on to that, Stickley and Bassett in 2007 suggests that mental health should be taught through problem and inquiry-based learning, and this allows students to actually develop the skills, not just the knowledge, to deal with certain situations. And it also provides them with opportunity to reflect on their decisions and evaluate them. And the outcome of their evaluation would then be a foundation from which to make their decisions in the real world. Interestingly, Stickley and Bassett also encourage the use of drama for the promotion and education of mental health. And again, this highlights the need for an interdisciplinary approach to this subject. So with the ever unpredictability of the world and society that we live in, it's important to take a preventative approach to teaching mental health rather than a reactive approach. So this means equipping our students with coping strategies and methods to build resilience so that they feel confident in making informed decisions about health when they leave school, when they leave the school environment. And this will hopefully help to build their self-esteem and help to cope with the increasing numbers of pressures and responsibilities we put on our younger generations. Now, this approach is suggested in the literature when Meldrum and Peters advocate that the school should offer protective factors to its students as well as reduce the risk factors. The idea being that building protective factors can actually equip students with coping skills. Okay, the resource that I looked at was Headstrong, which is by the Black Dog Institute, and it was published in 2013. So Headstrong is a curriculum resource for mental health, and it specifically focuses on mood disorders and building resilience and help seeking. As highlighted in the literature and statistics, mood disorders are a key concern among young children in the 21st century, which is why I decided to pick this as a resource. Its primary audience is teachers, and as such it provides a concise overview of mood disorders, which is what many teachers like, as we're often quite time short. So it provides information on mood disorders in young people specifically, how it can affect them and the signs to look for. So it's not just a teaching tool, but it's actually an informative tool as well. Within this point here, there are some linkages to the HPS framework, as it provides guidance on how to reduce stigmatisation of mental health within the whole school community. So it understands that it's not just an issue for the health and physical education classroom. It provides student-centred activities, so things like ICT research. There's a lot of discussion and brainstorming, and these teaching strategies are consistent with a lot of the current literature at the moment, for example, Catton and Tilford. And they're activities where students are working together and using each other's experiences rather than just being informed. However, there is a lot of the same type of activities, and most lessons follow a similar structure each time. So it's perhaps good to use as a base and for teachers to add their own flair to it a bit. It's not necessarily the flipped classroom, which seems to be a big buzzword in New South Wales at the moment, so perhaps use it with a little bit of caution. Having said that, there is some use of ICT with research activities to find local services. It does suggest to get in contact with local services. So again, there's some sign of the programme being designed using the HPS framework. And obviously, because this is a national resource, it would actually be quite difficult to really provide any further information on local services because it wouldn't be relevant to all audiences. There is a lot of mention about other courses that the Black Dog Institute deliver. However, in the information section, it does also point you in the direction of a number of other different websites and resources for extra information. So there is a bit of evidence here of having a holistic approach. There are direct linkages to the new Australian draft curriculum, which is good to see. So overall, it has some reasonable ideas and activities. I wouldn't suggest solely relying on it as a single resource, but I also agree with Wern 2000 when he states that we should avoid using a smorgasbord approach, so not using just little snippets of different resources, because we can lose the continuation of learning. So be mindful with that. In conclusion, with at least 1 in 4 of our students likely to suffer from a mental health issue, and even more knowing someone who actually suffers from one, it's important that we position mental health with importance through our teaching by conscientiously building protective factors for our students and working at a multi-agency level to do so. In this way, we can strive to develop happy and healthy students who are equipped as lifelong learners.